Good evening, Giants fans, the best fan base in the world, the toughest fan base in the world, because if you're a fan of this team, well, either got to be a little bit thick-skinned or you just got to be a psychopath. I fit both, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what the hell, why the hell. I don't know what I did. Well, I shouldn't say that. When I was younger, this team was actually good. They're like a quarter of a century, and now for the last 12 years, you've been absolute caca. But you know what? Our season's over. It was a terrible football weekend. The Eagles and Commanders both won, so that sucks. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Giants tonight, as we always do. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Of course, you got Audron down here. You got Anthony over here. We got Chris down there.
Hey, Trisha.
Hey, there you go. There you go.
I had to say hi to every time before we start the show. We see the 8 messages. No, we see it. Hey, Trisha. Thank you for popping in. Thank you to everybody for popping in.
I think Trish K wanted to tell Chris hi. So not really much to discuss. We do have one thing to discuss, but before we get into the firing of Jerome Henderson, this is one thing that I want to talk about, because this is something on Twitter, and I've definitely discussed my feelings on this a number of times, and I'm sure you guys have too, but I don't know that we've done it in this group setting. Twitter is always fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a war zone. Every take you have sucks. You're a complete idiot on everything you do. If you say something bad about the Giants, you're an idiot. If you say something good about the Giants, you're an idiot or a homer, or you're a shill and you work for the Giants. Of course,
those are my favorite comments.
Of course. So Lawrence Tynes said something about the Giants this season missed the man and leader more than the player, and that's saying something, talking about Saquon Barkley. Well, I responded and talked about how Barkley missed 24 games here. He averaged less than 4 yards carry, had 1,000 yards twice in his career here, and we were a combined 25, 48, 1. I said they don't miss him at all. This team is exactly the same with or without him, which, of course, some fans don't like to hear that because they're like, no, that's not true. You got to build around guys like Saquon Barkley. Adriana, let me get we always start with the lady first. Give me your thoughts on this whole Saquon Barkley thing. Was it wrong to let him go? Because people tell me, oh, Joe Shane let him go for nothing. They let him go for nothing. And I'm like, I don't understand. It's like selective memory. They offered him a big contract in 2022. Yes. He didn't take it. So what is your opinion on the whole Saquon Barkley thing?
My thing is, he was with the team for 5-6 years. And yes, he had a great career with the Giants, but he also was very injury prone. And I mean, technically the offense was better when he was on the team, but we also only won 6 games last year when he was on the team. And the last 3 games that we won were because our defense knew how to get turnovers, which this year apparently they were allergic to. So I think everyone makes a big deal about the leadership, and I'm not in the locker room, so I can't attest to this, but I really do not believe that Saquon being in that locker room would have made this team win 10 games this year. I just don't believe it. Like, you're talking about one player, and I don't think that one person is enough to galvanize this entire team and make someone like Tay Banks, who decided to slack off this year and have a bad year for whatever the reasons were. I don't think that someone like Saquon being in the locker room would have done anything to change that. There were so many issues with this team that him being here, I don't think would have made any type of difference. Like I said, he was here for however many years. We won one playoff game, which was a fluke, clearly, because we've had 3 years of Dable and only one of them has been good. So
when people said this to me, Adriana, about, they want to play, I'm like, you could say the same thing about Daniel Jones then, right?
Right.
And of course, if you bring up Daniel Jones as a sort of subject, because how can you play Jones instead of Barkley? Anthony, what's your opinion on this whole Saquon thing? Would it really matter if we brought him back? Would we be any better? I'm not talking about 2 games better. Are we a contender with Saquon Barkley?
No, we are not a contender with Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley doesn't have a 2,000-yard rushing season with the New York Giants. They're not coached the same way as the Eagles. They don't have the same offensive line talent as the Eagles, and they don't have the same wide receiver talent as the Eagles, because that does a lot for the Eagles' rushing attack. Saquon doesn't face nearly as many loaded boxes in Philadelphia as he did during his time with the Giants because they have legit playmakers on the outside that defenses have to account for. When he was with the Giants, they didn't have any talent around him. They didn't have playmakers on the outside. They didn't have a passing attack that you could respect. Defenses would load up the box against him and slow him down. And even with Malik Neighbors, I don't think that would change much either because they don't have a quarterback. So nothing's going to change for this team until they get a quarterback. The only thing that did change when Saquon Barkley left, I do think that had an impact on the locker room. I think he was really well liked, really well respected. Tommy DeVito has even said as much, and so have others. Isaiah Simmons, a lot of guys have spoken out about that and said his leadership has been missed. So I'll take their word for it, but I don't think that's leadership missed that causes you to lose 10 games in a row during the season. You know, it's Saquon Barkley being out there wouldn't have changed that. Maybe we win 1 or 2 more, as you said, Bad Dog, but we're not winning 5 or 7 games.
At that point, Anthony, we're not even in a better spot anyway. I mean, we'd have a worse draft pick at this point. You know,
and then he'd still be a free agent this offseason because they kept Joe Shane. So
Chris, how do you?
Yeah, I agree with, for the most part, I agree with what they said. I mean, I think if Shane could do it all over again, I think he would have signed him to the extension after 2022. I think he would have given him the extra $2 or $3 million a year, or whatever he wanted, to get it done. Because
do you think that has more to do with the fact that he went to Philadelphia?
I think that's part of it. And I think Shane, even though I think this team wouldn't be much better in the win-loss department, maximum 2 more wins if Saquon Barkley's on this team. We saw what he was last year. Not his fault. Like, if anything, the performance that Saquon Barkley has had since he's left the Giants shouldn't be like everybody looks at it differently. Like, some fans look at it like, I wish Saquon was still here and we'd be winning games and he was my favorite. The way I look at it is, it makes me upset that the New York Giants don't have a team that's able to maximize a guy like Saquon Barkley. And it's not just with Saquon Barkley. We've seen it with numerous other players that have left this team. Xavier McKinney's another perfect example, right? He leads the league in interceptions this year, that they leave the Giants and they become better. So he's just one of several examples. So that, to me, is apparent. But the narratives come out. So it's not a great look for Shane. So I think if he could have done it all over again, he would have given Barkley the $2 or $3 extra million per year, and he probably would tag Jones if he could do it all over again. He was steadfast in that. And I do think he may have not taken into account how important his leadership was to that locker room. Now, to be fair to Shane this year, I don't think the locker room completely cratered. It cratered for 1 week, and that was after they pulled Daniel Jones. And I felt like that week the team just felt like they were punched in the gut, and they did not compete that week. But after that, I felt like the team competed. So I don't necessarily know if they lost the locker room this year. But yeah, I think that was a valuable part of Barkley that maybe he underestimated a bit, but it wouldn't have made a big difference in terms of the wins and losses. It may have been a better culture, and maybe people wouldn't be talking about how things were going up in flames as much as they were, and some of the players would be happier playing here. But this team doesn't have more than 5, maybe 6 wins of Saquon Barkley still on this team. He's a tremendous football player, but he was a tremendous football player that we couldn't maximize. Right. It was like I've said before, it's like having a Toyota Prius with the best rims. There's no point. The Philadelphia Eagles had like an Escalade and they put rims on it. It was just a much better fit for them. They're able to get the most out of his ability. So it never made sense after the year where Shane decided not to keep him the first time to keep him this offseason based off where the Giants were. It didn't make any sense.
Right. The way I look at Barkley is a lot like Odell Beckham. He was a like a beam of light in a really dark cloud of a team, because we didn't win any games with Odell Beckham either. We won nothing with him. We went to the playoffs 1 year, and he was a great player, but he was injury prone. He was electric, but we didn't win any games. And fans had the same feeling about him when he left, and we didn't get any better after he left, and we weren't really good when he was here. And Barkley, kind of the same thing. That was really the reason to tune in to watch the Giants. There's no other reason, and maybe that's why some guys are hurt. And I know it hurt a lot of people when he went to Philly. It didn't hurt me. It pissed me off because I can't stand the freaking Eagles at all. I mean, I absolutely hate him. You just knew he was going to end up there, and he knew if he stayed healthy, he was going to have a big year because, like Anthony said, the team is set up for a guy like that to succeed, where you can't just cram the box because there's so many other weapons out there. And their line, if you look, again, Barkley with the Giants was after like 1.8 yards, he was contacted. And in Philadelphia, it's like 2.9 yards is contacted. So he's getting like an extra yard in Philadelphia before he makes contact.
More 20-plus yard runs like we became accustomed to seeing his first year while he was with the team. We even said it. We're like, he doesn't look as explosive as he used to. Well, when you get a running head start, you don't get touched for that extra yard or 2 yards because of the offensive line. you see explosive plays as a result. When you have two dominant wide receivers on the outside that have to spread out the offense, it's only going to help him. Same thing for Jalen Hurts, right? If Jalen Hurts, man, that guy has the best running back in the entire league. He has one of the top 3 or 4 receiving cores in the entire league. He has the best offensive line in the entire league. And he didn't look that good this past week. So he has everything you could possibly want. And as a Giants fan, I'm jealous of that. I'm not upset that we didn't bring Barkley back, because in my opinion, it didn't make sense because of how bad our team is. And we weren't in a position to be able to maximize his abilities and his age and his injury history and everything else. I'm upset that after 4 years of Dave Gettleman, after now 3 years of Joe Schoen, we're still where we are, which feels like at the beginning. So that's what I'm upset about, that we weren't in a position to be able to retain Saquon Barkley and be able to maximize his ability.
Yeah, that's what sucks. That's why it's such a bad team, because my whole point of this thing was it's not his fault. I mean, he was the best player on offense on our team, but we're not winning games. And I've said this a million times. I'm not a player guy. I don't give a shit about the name on the back of the jersey. I care about this, man. I don't care who's wearing the jersey. I'm rooting for the jersey. When they leave, it's not like I have any ill will. No, I didn't hope that he did good, obviously, because he's playing for Philadelphia. It's the jersey. It ain't him. I don't care about Saquon. I don't know Saquon as a person. I'm sure he's a great guy, but he's an Eagle. So I can't stand him. McKinney going to the Packers. Good for you, McKinney. I hope nothing but the best for Xavier McKinney.
I was definitely rooting for him this past week.
The laundry has everything to do with it. It's got nothing to do with the player at all. So obviously, moving on, and Adriana kind of touched on this. So we didn't get like any interceptions. We didn't have many. Got a couple at the end of the year, but we all know that we didn't turn anybody over this year. The Giants kept Joe Schoen. They kept Brian Daboll. Looks like they're going to keep Shane Bowen. They keep Kafka. They keep everybody. They fire the main culprit, Jerome Henderson. He was obviously the main culprit. This is the reason that we won 3 games. Anthony, give me your take on the firing of Jerome Henderson. What's your opinion on that?
I think it's fine. Like, I'm not upset about it. I've seen some Giants fans who are, because they feel as though Jerome Henderson had obviously a very good reputation. He lasted across several regimes here for the Giants, but I thought that the secondary looked out of position oftentimes last year. They didn't perform well, and young defensive backs over the last several years haven't really been developing. It took a while for Cordell Flott to come around. As a 3rd-round pick, you probably want him to come around a little bit sooner. Now he's a fringe starter at this point. Probably want that to happen sooner in his development. Drew Phillips came onto the scene really quickly and played great, so I guess you can give some credit to Jerome Henderson there, although I think that was just great drafting. I thought that was a gem that the Giants found. And Deonte Banks, we all know, I mean, he just hasn't developed at all. He is what he was last year. In fact, he looks worse. And I think that regression from Deonte Banks is an indictment on Jerome Henderson. If you're credited for being this guy who's known to be a great leader for the young defensive backs, be great at developing young defensive back talent, well, when the Giants, they spent a 1st-round draft pick to give you a young defensive back talent, that young defensive back better develop rather quickly. And unfortunately for Deonte Banks, he's only regressed since he entered the league. So, again, I think that is an indictment on Jerome Henderson. And while I think the Giants should be having wholesale coaching staff changes, and I don't think that it should start and end with Jerome Henderson, I think Bowen should go too. I don't think he will, though. At least this is one step in the right direction if you want to look at it that way. Something needed to change in that secondary. He also was the passing game coordinator. I think that's important to mention. He wasn't just the DB's coach.
Oh, I forgot
so when
about
they were
that.
doing when they were doing their game planning on a week-to-week basis, he had a huge say on what the coverage scheme was going to look like and who was matching up with who. And the Giants never looked like they matched up well this past season in terms of which DB was covering which wide receiver and which coverage they were facing or playing against each team that they were facing. So if you take that into account, I do think that's a pretty important factor to consider, and definitely one that factors into the firing of Jerome Henderson here.
Yeah, well, I agree, man. I don't know that I wanted a complete wholesale. Like I said, I was okay either way, but I feel like Shane Bowen should also be let go. I think he was terrible, and honestly, I don't know what Mike Kafka does either. I really don't. So I don't know, man. I would love to know what Mike Kafka does if Brian Daboll's calling plays. Chris, what was your feeling about Jerome Henderson being fired?
Yeah, so I wasn't on Twitter a lot today because I was busy at work, but I did see that when it went down, and I did see some of the people's narratives after the fact saying that the Giants are pinning this all on Jerome Henderson. I don't think that's the case. Now, I'm not upset that Jerome Henderson's gone. He had a good reputation. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, he was with Revis at the beginning, right? Like I think I remember that, right? He was with Revis with the Jets, or am I thinking of somebody else? I remember he had a really good reputation with young cornerbacks, and I thought maybe I'm wrong on that. But he had a really good reputation when we brought him in. We were all really excited when the Giants hired Jerome Henderson. And like Anthony said, the cornerbacks haven't been very good. But what I look at this is he was a holdover from the previous defensive coordinator. He wasn't a Shane Bowen guy. And I think this is more so Shane Bowen is probably coming back. He wants to have his DB coach. He wants to have his guy for his defensive scheme. I don't view this as the New York Giants are pinning this on Jerome Henderson. I view this more as the Giants are like, well, we got to try to do what we can and maximize our defensive coordinator. Let him find a defensive backs coach that he is comfortable with for his defensive scheme. So that's the way that I viewed that. I didn't view it like the Giants were pinning it on Jerome Henderson or anything like that. Bowen being back, I'm not thrilled about it. I don't think he did a good job. I mean, you could certainly say at the beginning of the year, they led the league in sacks for the first, 6-7 weeks, and Dexter Lawrence got hurt like a little bit more than midway through the year. So I'm sure that's what he argued when they were talking about potentially moving on from him. But the defense was not good. I mean, it wasn't what we were hoping it would be. They were not nearly as good in the red zone as I anticipated, even though they were actually better in the red zone than I thought when I looked at the stats at the end of the year. I think they were like 12th or 13th. Their third down defense the defense was bad. We saw it every week. And the thing we were most looking forward to with Shane Bowen was we thought that he would be a significant upgrade against the run as opposed to Wink Martindale, who historically wasn't very good against the run. We were still horrible against the run. That's still a major problem. So I wouldn't have blinked an eye if they let Shane Bowen go, as I was rooting for it. I was leaning he'd be back, and the fans kind of convinced me it on Twitter about a week ago that I was like, okay, maybe they have a point when they're talking about the way that John Mara's talking about the defense. Maybe they will kick him out the door. But the way I always looked at it was, if you're thinking about it from the perspective of Brian Dable, you just fired Wink Martindale the year before. There was whispers throughout the league that he couldn't get along with Wink Martindale. So you're already starting to get kind of a bad reputation with your ability to work with other coaches on the other side of the ball. You bring in this guy, and after 1 year, you're just going to fire the guy. Once I knew Dable was coming back, I thought Bowen would be back as well. So I'm not surprised by this. I'm not happy. I would much rather have a guy like Robert Saleh. He would never take this job. But yeah, I'm not surprised. I once you knew that Dable was coming back, I figured that Bowen would be back as well.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on Henderson being let go?
Yeah, I feel a little bit the same as Chris. Like, I agree with everyone. We all wanted Bowen gone, but I felt like because of the optics, the Giants care so much about that, which was so mind-boggling to me when Mara came out and was like just shitting all over the defense. I'm like, yeah, okay. Tell us how you really feel. I agree with you. But so I get the feeling a little bit that by firing him and firing the safeties coach, that it's a little bit of a scapegoat because they're not getting rid of Bowen. Now, they didn't fire everyone, all of the position coaches, which maybe says something. We know that Andre Patterson, who's the defensive line coach, him and Dexter Lawrence are super close. And Dexter Lawrence has come out and said, he really attributes the reason why he's been so successful these last couple of years to him. So I think maybe there was some reasoning along that way that they didn't want to get rid of everyone, and Bowen must like some of the other position coaches. Obviously, the defensive backs had a horrible year, so I'm curious to see if something like this is going to help make some changes. The concern that I have now is I don't really trust Shane Bowen, so the guys that he brings in, I don't know how great I'm going to feel about the new safeties coach and the new DBs coach, but maybe it'll be better than having someone who's been here through Joe Judge and whatever. And, we've had a couple of years now where our corners have not been all that great. And part of that is obviously talent, but I'm curious to see now who Bowen brings in, if they're going to make that much of a difference. And I mean, lucky for the guys coming in that the DBs as a whole have been pretty shitty over the last year. So, hopefully the only way they can go is up.
Yeah, you would think that with the team. You'd think all we can do is go up, and yet we still find new depths to sink to every freaking year, it seems. So, Chris, I'll start with you on this one. You and I did the college football playoff games on Thursday and Friday. The Giants picked third. Deshaun Watson's now torn his Achilles tendon, so he's out next year. There's a good chance Cleveland goes quarterback. There's a good chance Titans go quarterback. We're picking third. I know before we did those playoff games, at least me, I was get Travis Hunter. And then we watched Penn State and fell in love with Abdul Carter. If those quarterbacks are gone, is Abdul Carter your guy?
I'm going to continue to say I think Shedeur Sanders is going to be our pick. I'm very confident in that. I'm like 90%.
Yeah, hypothetically speaking.
Yeah, I'm 90% on that. But if the two quarterbacks are gone, who would I want? Now, I know a lot of fans. What's funny to me, guys, is one of the biggest knocks that people have on Joe Schoen, and I think there's some legitimacy to it. I'm not defending Joe Schoen here, is that he drafts too much for need. Anthony said it several times. People on Twitter say it all the time. And then by the same token, when you and I, because I saw Bad Dog bring it up as well, I brought it up on Twitter after the Penn State game. When I bring up the possibility of the Giants potentially drafting Abdul Carter because I'm so enamored with him, half the Giants fan base on Twitter is like, that makes no sense. We've got Kayvon Thibodeau. We've got Brian Burns. Well, you can't have it both ways. If you want the general manager to draft the best available player and he feels that Abdul Carter is a generational player at that position, well, then you should be excited for him to take that player if your team need over best available player. So my outlook on it is I'm blown away by that guy. Now, do I think the Giants will draft him based off prior history? No. And I wouldn't be upset at all if they draft Travis Hunter, by the way. He's incredibly valuable. Great cornerback, great wide receiver. He's going to be great. He's going to be a great pro. But I look at Abdul Carter, and again, I've watched a little bit of him. I got to watch his for an entire game on the big stage against Notre Dame, one of the better offensive lines in football with a hurt shoulder. Mm-hmm. And he looked like he should be the number one pick in the draft. That's how excited I was after that game. And I know a lot of people say that his weight's not what it says on his play, because some people say 230. I think he was listed around 245, 250. I'm not worried about that. He'll put on muscle. People said the same thing about Micah Parsons. He's a freak. Would I be upset if the Giants drafted him? No. Do I think they will? No. In the scenario that you said, which I don't think will happen, but if it does, I think we would end up drafting Travis Hunter. That's what I think we would do with the third pick.
Audra, a hypothetical, first two quarterbacks are gone. Where do we go number 3? What do you think? Where do you go, and what do you want to do if they're both gone?
I feel pretty much like Chris. Like I'm taking Abdul Carter, and I'm either re-signing Aziz because we still need depth there, or I'm trading Kayvon. Or you keep both of them and you don't re-sign Aziz. Like it's not a bad idea to have depth at the pass rusher position. God forbid the Giants actually have depth at one position for runs in their life, especially with Bowen coming back and knowing like what kind of defensive scheme he's going to run, whatever type of changes he's going to make based on personnel, which I hope he does that. I would take Carter over Travis Hunter. And my reasoning for that is I think this coaching staff is going to absolutely ruin Travis Hunter. And I'm also worried that they're going to force him into one position. And part of me feels like that's the smart thing, but I'm also like, the reason this guy is a Heisman winner and the reason that, he's going to get drafted so high is because he plays both sides of the ball. But I just don't think that the coaching staff is going to utilize him the best way they should. And maybe it's just this coaching staff. If it was someone else, I'd feel differently. And if I kind of feel like they're going to have an awful season and everyone's going to get fired anyway. So maybe if they have Hunter and then, they have a new coach next year, he'll utilize him the right way. But I just would hate for his rookie season to feel like it's kind of a waste. So I would go Carter and either trade Kayvon, re-sign Aziz, or you keep Kayvon, get rid of Aziz, and just finally get some depth there. And then I'd go quarterback in round 2.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you what, if I had the first pick, I would take Carter. That's how good I think he is. And I don't claim to be a scout, but I was blown away. Like, there's certain players, guys, when you watch them play, you're just like, that's it. Yeah, that's the number one pick in an NFL draft type talent. That's how I feel about him.
He led the country in tackles for loss and sacks. So,
and it was his first year. I didn't even know that. After the game, I found out that's his first year playing the edge this year. He's converted from the linebacker position. So it's kind of like, if I'm not mistaken, I think Quinnen Williams, when he was at Alabama, he shifted positions his last year. I think he was a defensive end, and then he shifted to the interior his last year. and everybody saw the potential based off that because he was still learning the position. It's the same thing here. Didn't Micah Parsons also play inside? He did, right? Yeah, and then he converted fully to the edge. So, what are you thinking? I think he's the best player in this draft.
Yeah,
I think Travis Hunter is the best player in the draft, so that's who I would take.
Yeah.
I think Travis Hunter is special. He's just a generational athlete, like not even talking about football, but just his athleticism is unbelievable. He's even a good basketball player. Like, I don't think there's anything he can't do, and I don't see a way that he fails, no matter what the coaching is, no matter how bad the team around him is.
Really?
I think that Travis Hunter is going to be a successful player. I mean, listen, the coaching's bad here. We know that, but I think that Travis Hunter is just so special. He's going to succeed anywhere. Now, I love Abdul Carter. I think he's also a great player. And I think that the benefit of both of these guys, like a major positive for both Hunter and Carter, is the fact that both of them are versatile. So if they fail at one position, throw them at the other. It goes for Hunter. If he's not a good cornerback in the NFL, okay, he's probably a good receiver then. If he's not a good receiver, just keep him at cornerback. Or if you're looking at Carter, let's say he doesn't get that much production off the edge as a pass rusher. Well, he's played inside linebacker before, so he'll probably be good there if he's not good as a pass rusher. But I think he's going to be a damn good pass rusher at the next level. But that's the big benefit of both of those players to me. Obviously, I want a quarterback with the number 3 pick, but if they're both off the board, it's one of those two guys because I know that that's 4 positions potentially that could be addressed. If they fail at one, they're going to get the other one. But again, I think that Travis Hunter is the best player in the draft, so that would be my selection over Carter. Yeah, but that's because I am best player available. I do think that edge is a sneaky big need for the Giants. Like, I think that you can never have enough pass rushers. I think Giants fans should know that better than anybody after watching Super Bowl 42 and 46. And even if you're old enough to be alive back and watch the Super Bowls in the 80s, which I wasn't, but pass rushing has always been the identity of this team. So I don't know how anybody can argue against taking Abdul Carter at number 3 overall if the Giants feel like he is the best player in the draft. So if you're going BPA, if you think it's Hunter, take Hunter. But if you think it's Carter, by all means, go ahead and take Carter, and I'd be happy with that too.
Gut feeling, Anthony. Are we getting a quarterback in this draft? Gut feel.
Yeah, gut feel.
With the first pick, sorry. With the first pick, I should specify.
Yeah, gut feel. I'm with Chris. I think the Giants are going to end up drafting Shedeur Sanders, and I think it's because the more and more that we read about Shedeur and the more reporters and insiders who go on these different shows. Like if you saw Daniel Jeremiah go on the Rich Eisen show recently, he kind of indicated scouts are not nearly as high as the media on Sanders. I saw Dane Brugler of The Athletic today say scouts are not nearly as high as the media is on Shedeur Sanders. I don't think he's going to be a top 2 pick. I think he might be the number 3 pick because I think the Giants are going to take him no matter what because they need a quarterback, and that's what they should do. Is you guys know my stance. If you've got a quarterback, go ahead and take one. But I don't think that he is going to be viewed around the NFL as a surefire slam dunk top 5 pick, Shedeur Sanders.
I agree with you. I think there are some teams that would take him in the top 5, but yeah, I agree he's not a slam dunk.
And I think the Giants will. I think they are going to take him in the top 5. But I think a lot of teams are going to look at that and say, should you have done that? I don't know.
And I think Deion wants him to play there. I think unless Deion gets the Cowboys job. I know that there was reported talk there. If that happens, then all bets are off. Then at that point, you have to figure the Cowboys may look to trade up, obviously, to get his son. But that's where my head's at, man. And I don't think I'm going to change my opinion on it until draft night. We'll see. Maybe the combine, my mind will change. But I think we're going to end up with Shedeur. And I see Simon in the chat said, this man said pass rusher, and we literally have no corner. First off, Simon, we haven't seen free agency take place yet. Like, if they plan to take Abdul Carter, or at least would be potentially interested in Abdul Carter, they would probably address the cornerback position in free agency, much like the Giants did with James Bradbury a few years ago, like they did with Adoree Jackson. So we have to see how the plan plays out. But, I just don't get fans that scream and cry that Joe Schoen drafts exclusively for need. And then when we bring up the possibility of drafting a player at the 2nd or 3rd most important position on a football team who looks incredibly dominant as an option, people say we don't need that. Well, you can't have it both ways. So
also, I would argue we do need that. We do need that.
Yeah,
we watch Kayvon.
Yeah, we don't know what Kayvon's going to be long term. He hasn't shown enough. Yeah, absolutely.
He stinks.
All right. Before we get to some of these questions, ask your questions in the chat. I'm gonna do something a little different here. Do something a little different. Let's start with Adriana. Give Giants fans some hope in 2025. How do you convince the fan base that 2025 is going to? No, we're not going to the playoffs. I'm not saying convince them we're going to win 11 games. Somehow give them hope that next year will be better. What can you say? Like, what can you say? We're going to be better because of this. I know it's a hard question, But I wanted to do something a little different. I kind of wanted to put if we can find a positive spin.
Okay, so I have a degree in public relations, so I know how to spin narratives here. So
Perfect.
this is how I'm going to do it.
Joe Shane should put you on the payroll because he needs.
Yeah, right. I'll send Pat Hanlon my bulleted list of things to turn it around. Okay, number one, Joe Shane had a really great draft last year. This year, we know that it's a heavier draft in defensive linemen, which is a position that we so desperately need. And we have more picks in the draft this year, which is going to allow us, hopefully, to bring in a couple more players in the draft. And if we have a little bit of faith that Joe Shane did two things well last year, the draft, and he didn't fix the offensive line, but it is significantly better than what it has been for the last decade. So maybe we have a little bit of hope that in the draft, he's going to bring in some more key players in good positions. And he is also, he's going to utilize free agency, and hopefully, knock on wood, this is also what he said, is that he's not going to overspend. He doesn't have a history of doing that, but he also has a history of bringing in veterans.
I don't believe that.
Positions.
I don't believe that. I like your spin, but I don't believe that. I think he's going to spend.
Wasn't convincing enough?
I believe most of what you said, but the non-spending part, I don't believe that. I
am very concerned about that, but it's the first year that he's been here that he's going to have the most amount of money that he's ever had. Kevin Abrams is, I don't know, supposedly good at navigating the cap and the contracts. And I think if we don't go after the superstar big names, like if we're not going after T. Higgins, and Trey Smith, why can't we bring in a different guard or a different tackle or like someone like Illuminor? Van Roten, perfect examples. They were not perfect, but we were able to upgrade specific positions with better talent, and we didn't have to spend an arm and a leg. So I'm hopeful that Joe will do that again in free agency, specifically at quarterback, corner, and swing tackle.
Yeah.
Anthony, give the fan base some hope for 2025. What do you think?
It's tough to do, but the Giants have the number 3 overall pick in the draft. They have $45 million in salary cap space, and they have Malik Neighbors. That alone should give you some hope that there is a way to luck into getting it right. Like the Giants seem to figure out how to mess it up every single time, but they've got some money, they've got a high draft pick, and they have a young superstar. That alone should just give you at least some hope that if they make a couple of changes, they draft a couple of players, maybe they can be at least watchable in 2025. I wouldn't hope for Super Bowl aspirations or even playoff aspirations, but if you want this team to be watchable, I think that they will at least get closer to that level this season based on the factors that I mentioned.
Chris?
It's the NFL. That's your hope. I mean, every year, and not to say especially with our schedule, I'm not expecting the playoffs. Like even if everything breaks right and maybe we could compete for the playoffs, like if everything breaks right. But I'm not going to go into the year even thinking it's even a remote possibility that we're going to be a playoff team when you factor in our schedule. If our schedule was differently, I may feel different if things break right in the offseason. But for me, it's not about – I mean, it's always about the playoffs as a fan. You want your team to win the Super Bowl every year. But for me, next year, the hope starts with the quarterback. And I think we all agree that they're probably drafting a quarterback. They may not. Maybe they go the veteran route. Maybe they go Sam Darnold. I don't think they will. I think they're drafting a quarterback. And that, to me, is where the hope is going to start and finish for the year of 2025. Everything in terms of future hope for this football team is going to depend on the quarterback that they select, if they do select one with that 3rd overall pick, how he grows throughout the course of the year. That's what I'm looking forward to next year. I know we're not winning a Super Bowl. And then I'll say, look at Washington. You want hope? Look at Washington. There was a team that was down in the dumps. Now, of course, they had wholesale change. They brought in a new owner, from the top, and they got Jaden Daniels. Not that I expect any of these quarterbacks to be Jaden Daniels. They were aggressive. They brought in a plethora of free agents, something that I do expect the Giants to do this year. I think they will be aggressive. Change can happen fast in the NFL. It can. It's just that it hasn't happened for the New York Giants. And I do think Shane, in terms of free agency thus far, has actually been pretty good. And if you want to look at it from an optimistic standpoint, not so much letting Barkley and McKinney go. I'm talking about guys that he's brought in. But if you want to also, like Adriana said, the draft. I think that's something that you could say, okay, third year, he actually had a really good draft. These players look promising. Let's see if he could build off of it. They have more picks than they've ever had. But I think you got to be realistic. That's the one thing that I'm really worried about from the fan base is they're going to look at what Washington did this offseason. They're going to say, well, they just got a quarterback, and they snapped their fingers and they won 12 games and they're in the second round of the playoffs. The pressure for Shedeur Sanders, if we draft this kid, is going to be insane. You tack on the fact, obviously, New York, starved fan base. You look at what these rookie quarterbacks have done the last couple of years in Washington, in Houston with C.J. Stroud, and I think fans are going to be, some fans at least, are going to be expecting immediate results. I hope fans go in with a more realistic approach and realize that he's a rookie, realize that this team is not that far along, although there are nice pieces. Malik Neighbors, the line is hopefully getting better, but we got ways to go. I think you got to be – I think there's reason to think things could be trending down the right path if things break our way this offseason, but you still got to be realistic and realize this team's at least another year away before we could even dream about doing what Washington did this year.
Yeah, agree. And Chris brought a thumbs down bubble next to him, so obviously don't. Yeah, to touch on pretty much everything you guys said, I can't disagree. I think Adriana, the best thing that we probably can look forward to is that I feel like he did have a really good draft last year. And people could say, well, you got to wait a few years, and I understand that, but I think that these guys did play well. I think Tyrone Tracy outperformed. I mean, he was amazing when he got the starting job for a fifth-round pick. He had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage. He didn't become the starter like week 5. With Andrew Thomas being out pretty much since that point. So he didn't even have Andrew Thomas most of the time. Drew Phillips, like Anthony mentioned, was a fantastic player. Newman was really good. And Malik Neighbors is a freaking beast, set the Giants reception record with 4 of the worst quarterbacks in the league throwing to him. So there are things to look at, maybe that they're going in a positive direction. But again, you just got to keep building. And as I said last week, I'm not expecting this team to go to the playoffs. I'm not even looking for that next year. I just want to be competitive. I want to play. I mean, I would love to win and go to the playoffs, but I'm just looking for them to compete like Carolina did, where Carolina played the best.
That would be a perfect year for me.
Right.
Not perfect, obviously, but I would be happy with that year. Like what Carolina did. They had a young quarterback that got better throughout the course of the year. Right. They competed the last 6 or 7 weeks against good football teams. If we drafted a Cam Order or Shedeur Sanders with that third pick, what Carolina did this year, I would be okay with that type of season next year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, I mean, you baby steps.
Yeah.
If we could win 6 games, 7 games, but you've competed against the Lions and you competed against the Chiefs and you played them tough and you weren't blown out and you brought them down to the wire. Those are the, people talk about the culture and how winning builds culture. I've always said winning builds culture, but with a team like this, I don't like moral victories, but the Giants need to draw moral victory. Like they have to have some. They can't go against Kansas City and Detroit, lose 45-7, 45-3. You're not going to be able to build off that. You lose a game to Kansas City 30-27. These are things that you can build off of. Saying, listen, we're right there. Because I feel like in 2007, we weren't a great team, weren't bad. But when they competed with the Patriots that last week of the season, to me, that gave them all the confidence in the world. So, well, if we can play that team like that, and they're the best team by far in the league, why the hell can't we beat everybody else? We can play them right down to the wire. There's no reason to think we were not the best team in football because we played them right down to the wire. We all know how that season ended. And I'm not saying we're a Super Bowl team, but just being able to compete against the best teams and feel like you're right there. Confidence goes a long way, man. I say it all the time, not just in the NFL, but in anything you do, if you're confident in, you're going to do it better than if you don't have confidence yourself. The Giants lack confidence with good reason. They get blown out a lot. We got to start competing. I just want to be respectable. I'm sick of being a punchline and a speed bump for everybody in the league. It's disgusting, and I'm sick and tired of it, man. It pisses me off. I'm not going to lie. I hate being that team.
Yeah,
I hate it. Davey, thank you, brother. He says, hey, Tony, what's the likelihood Shedeur Sanders drops to pick 3? Seems like if he does, Shane will draft him.
Yeah, I guess I already answered this one earlier. I think that Shedeur will drop to number 3 overall. Again, it's who knows because the draft is so crazy. But right now in January, we're starting to hear these murmurs that scouts and people in the NFL aren't as high on Shedeur, and he's probably going to have a little bit of a slide because, we were seeing mock drafts a couple of weeks ago where he was the number 1 overall pick in like all of them, and there were teams trading up to get him. I don't think that's going to be the case. anymore. I think that he will absolutely fall to number 3. One of those two teams at the top, I think, is going to pass on him. But if they don't, hey, at least the Giants are sitting pretty at number 3. They can get the best player in the draft, whether that is Carter or Hunter, both of whom we mentioned earlier. But I think that Sanders will be there 3, and I think that you are right, Davey. I think that Joe Schoen is going to draft him.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that because I agreed with Anthony earlier. I said the same thing. And it's not that I actually think Cleveland would take Shedeur Sanders, but my mindset has been now for a few weeks is I think Deion Sanders is going to force Shedeur Sanders to the New York Giants because Cleveland needs hope too. They need a quarterback too. But I think Deion Sanders in the back rooms is going to let out. He's basically said it. Somebody retweeted on Twitter that in 2018, he basically said, I'd never let my son play for that football team in so many words. So Cleveland's not going to want to deal with that headache. So I think when push comes to shove, he's going to force him to the Giants. Now, what I'm somewhat worried about is will the Giants be willing to trade up to 2 to ensure they get him? That, I suppose, is a little bit of worry of mine. I don't think they will in the end, and I think he'll get the 3. And like Anthony said, I think I'm like – and again, things change. Like if you would ask me I think I was pretty sure that we were taking Neighbors the entire – but in prior drafts, your opinions change throughout the course of the process. So maybe my opinion will be differently. But right now, I am very strongly, heavily leaning Shedeur Sanders is going to be a Giant.
Audrana, any opinion there? You're muted.
So my dog was making annoying noises in the background. I think if Sanders falls to 3, there's a 0% chance the Giants do not take him. But I think we might have to be more worried about the Titans because I just saw a tweet that our collective favorite, Shane Bowen, is going to be coaching at the Shrine Bowl, and he is coaching the West team, which apparently some of the other coaches, assistant coaches, whatever, on that team are going to be Titans coaches, and they're going to get to coach players such as Shedeur Sanders. So I think maybe once the Shrine Bowl is over, maybe we'll hear some sort of inkling coming from the Titans camp, but they're going to have that opportunity to be up close and personal with him during the Shrine Bowl. So I think depending on how that goes, we could get an idea of whether or not they really like him. Because like you guys said, I also agree that Deion is 100% going to get involved. I think he would feel much better about his kid definitely going to the Giants, but I think he'd even prefer the Titans over Cleveland. So, if he ends up going 1 overall, then we're probably getting Carter because I think that the Browns would go Ward, and then they probably wouldn't have any other issues. They don't have to worry about Deion getting involved.
Cam Ward drop the 3, please, one time.
You never know. Could happen.
Listen, as Giants fans deserve something. I've been following this team for 41 years. Give me something. I've only been asking for Cam. I asked Santa Claus for Cam Ward, for crying out loud. I was a good boy this year, so hopefully Santa comes through with that. Age 50, thank you, brother. He says, if the top 2 quarterbacks are gone, do you think Dart and Milroe and other quarterbacks get drafted in the first round like Nick's JJ and Penix said last year? I think teams will get their quarterbacks in the first round, even though they are a second or third round. Anthony, what do you think about that? I think that we talked about this last time, that when they come off the board, they could start coming off the board. And I've said this too. If there are quarterbacks available to back into the Giants are going back up there, would make no sense to wait to 34 to pick your quarterback because you're not going to get the 5th-year option. It makes all sense in the world to move from 34 to 29, 34 to 30. You're not going to have to give up that much, and you'd have a 5th-year option. But, Anthony, do you think the Giants even have a chance to draft one of those guys at the back end of the first round?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I mentioned last week. If you're going to take one of those quarterbacks, get into the first round, get that 5th-year option. You need that. If you're looking at the way the quarterbacks get paid nowadays, even if you're an average quarterback, you're making $20 to $40 million per season. So, yeah, it's usually 40 at the bare minimum.
Like I saw Alex post. I'm not looking at getting into debates on Twitter, but I saw Alex post, I think it was yesterday or today on Twitter, saying that if the Giants were to sign Sam Darnold to $20 million a year, it would be the worst idea in the world. And in my head, I'm like, $20 million is cheap. Like, I'd be okay with $20 million for Sam Darnold. Tyrod Taylor got $10 million. He's a backup. So, yeah, listen, any okay starter in today's NFL.
Daniel Jones got $40 million.
They're going to look at Daniel Jones's contract. They're going to say the market's only going to go up. Right. I better be getting at least $40 million.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, I was surprised that Baker even went down to 33, considering Daniel Jones got 40. I actually thought Baker Mayfield should have gotten more.
I think he gave them a discount. I think he could have.
I do too, and it paid off. They went back to playoffs. But to fully answer this question, I don't think that it's going to be a situation like Nix, JJ Penix last year, all of those guys were worthy of being drafted in the first round. Dart and Milroe, not so much. Like, they are far more of projects. They're far less proven than those other prospects. They're not going to end up flying off the board all inside the top 10 like it happened last year. It'll be more so towards the end of the draft. Some of these teams that are looking to stash a quarterback, more similar to which draft class Jordan Love was in. I don't remember, but that year, that was a down year for quarterbacks. But the Packers, they had a late first round pick. They were like, okay, let's take him. Let's stash him behind Aaron Rodgers for a few years.
Wasn't that the same class with Burrow at the top and Tua and Herbert? Or
I thought it was the year either prior or following.
You might be right.
Could be right. You could be right.
Yeah.
I don't know. But either way, that concept of a player who Jordan Love had first, second, third round projections, he was all over the place. He definitely was not a lock to go in the first round. They ended up taking him towards the back end of the first round so that they could have that fifth-year option and have a succession plan behind Rodgers. That made sense. And if the New York Giants aren't going to get a quarterback at number 3 overall, I want that fifth-year option, especially if they're going to go out and spend big on a bridge quarterback, whether that be a Darnold, who Chris just mentioned, or if it's a Justin Fields. Doesn't matter. You have to keep into account they're going to be wasting kind of the first year of that rookie quarterback's contract while they're letting him grow behind the scenes and develop. So you want that fifth-year option. So I'm more than happy to trade up into the back end of the first round. And I like Dart and I like Milroe in some respects, but I'm starting to really like Dart, and I think he will go at the back end of the first round.
Yeah.
Adriana, do you think those you think the Giants have a chance to draft one of those two quarterbacks? You think they're going to go before we have a chance to get them if we don't take a quarterback at 3?
I don't think there's going to be a run on quarterbacks in the first round like there was last year. And from all of the mock drafts that I'm seeing outside of those top 2 guys, there are no other quarterbacks in the first round at all. And obviously things will change, especially after the combine. All of these guys who are projected second, third, fourth rounders, if they have a good day at the combine, it's all going to change. But I do think because we have such an early second round pick, we are in a really good position. But if they want to trade back into the first because they feel like they are going to miss out on someone like Dart or Milroe, I'm on board with that. I think realistically, we need a quarterback, and I don't want to feel like we're in a position where we miss out on the guy that we want for the second year in a row because we can't move up to get him.
Chris, do you think they both make it to the back end of the first round?
I definitely don't think it'll be like last year. Last year was like a freak quarterback class.
Yeah,
like
6 on the top 12.
Like JJ McCarthy last year, most people would say at this point would be the number 1 quarterback in this class. Same thing with Michael Penix. So I just think it was a much stronger quarterback class. Not to mention, I feel, and I'd have to really like analyze each team and think about it, but I feel like last year there were even more quarterback needy teams at the top of the draft. I would be stunned if Milroe, Dart, if those guys went in the first half of the first round. I would be pretty surprised. I feel like those guys are getting talked up right now because people are looking for other alternatives, because people aren't super high in Shedeur Sanders. People are getting bored. We're at the stage in the draft talk where people are just looking to come up with storylines. And at the end, I think it'll all play out the way that most people think. I think those 2 quarterbacks will be in the top 3 or 4 picks. And then I think they may seep into the back end of the first round for reasons we've expressed, but I think most people view those guys as second-round quarterback prospects. I feel like this class is, not that I'm trying to put the bad vibes out there, but I feel like this quarterback class is similar to the 2019 quarterback class, where there was 1 or 2 quarterbacks where you were fairly confident. Now, most people thought the other quarterback was going to be Haskins, not Daniel Jones, but you had Kyler Murray and Dwayne Haskins, where most people thought would be in the first 5 or 10 picks. And then most people projected a guy like Daniel Jones to be back end of the first round, early second. Same with Drew Lock. I feel like this is similar in that aspect. I feel like you're going to have 2 quarterbacks in the first 5 picks, and then no quarterbacks until either the beginning of the second round or the very back end of the first round. Unless you get Dave Gettleman making a pick, then maybe one of those guys come in.
Let's hope Dave Gettleman's nowhere near the picking this time. Pete, thank you very much. Really appreciate the generosity. He says, been loving listening to the 4 of you on this panel. Hope this continues for a long time. Thank you, Pete. We appreciate it. And we plan on it because we're going to do this till the Giants are good. So we could be here until we're retired. And it's just, good 12, 15 years away, maybe more. I might be in a walker by the time Chris and I will be in our wheelchairs doing games.
We'll be in diapers for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But thank you, Pete. We really appreciate that, man. Thank you for the generous donation. Thank you for the compliment. Davey, thank you again, brother. He says, Say Ward and Shador are gone at 3. Would you surprise Minnesota the last-minute trade for J.J. McCarthy?
Not happening. Not happening. I'll answer it. You guys can piggyback off it. But I'm just so sick. Not that I'm sick of you saying it, Davey. I get it. It's fun to talk about. But so many people just keep bringing this up on Twitter. It's not happening. The Minnesota Vikings are not going to trade J.J. McCarthy, especially after the way that Sam Darnold played the last 2 weeks of the season. I think a lot of people have tried to compare that to the Arizona Cardinals when they got rid of when they drafted Kyler Murray and they got rid of Josh Rosen. It's a completely different scenario. KOC was the head coach when they drafted J.J. McCarthy, so he likes him. They spent the 10th overall pick on him. It's a team that won 14 games, so they're not in any rush to throw him out there. They're also not in any rush to trade him. They think highly of him. I would be blown away if J.J. McCarthy's traded by the Minnesota Vikings. I
also would have a problem with the fact that they could have taken him 6th. Why would you give up the number 3 overall pick?
That's the other thing.
Granted, you have Malik Neighbors now, and like you mentioned, Chris, most people would think McCarthy would be the best number 1 quarterback off the board in this draft class, but I'm with you. I don't think Minnesota is going to trade. Minnesota has an option to do whatever they want, especially since Darnold did not.
I think that's the better question. I'm curious to get your guys' opinions on that. After the way that Darnold finished the season, I was pretty certain he was going to be back as a Viking, and I'm still probably leaning he'll be back as a Viking. But what do you guys think? Do you think he hits the open market? Do you think the Vikings bypass the franchise tag and they say, we'll let him test the market? And I think somebody will give him a good amount of money because teams are quarterback hungry. Do you think he's back with the Vikings, or do they just go forward with J.J. McCarthy and maybe bring in a guy like a Daniel Jones, for example, like what Sam Darnold was last year, a guy that's a fringe starter looking to make a name for himself and ease J.J. McCarthy in that way?
I
could see Darnold not being back. He's going to cost a lot of money, and you could get a guy like Daniel Jones or Justin Fields.
Yeah,
that's not going to cost near as much. And McCarthy coming off a torn up knee, you might want to ease him back into it. So, yeah, it's possible they don't give Sam Darnold big money. I don't know how much Darnold cost himself the last 2 weeks, but he's still not going to – it's not like you're going to be able to get him for $20 million. He's going to be $35, $40 million. Somebody's going to pay him. So, yeah, a gut feeling, man, I don't know. They did win 14 games. They're pretty damn good, but that offense is really good anyway. I don't know. I think they're going to let Darnold hit the market.
You think so? You think? Yeah.
I
don't think so.
Unless they tag him.
I don't think so either.
Yeah,
I think he'll be there. I mean, they've never won 14 games in a single season. That's the greatest regular season in Minnesota Vikings history. And Sam Darnold, maybe they're the worst 14-win team.
They won 15. They won 15 and 1, right?
15. Sorry, whatever. Yeah. All I know is however many wins this season they had is the most that they've ever had in a single season. So that is a stat that I heard on Rich Eisen's show.
What about 1998? Weren't they?
Maybe they were 14-2 that year. They definitely
the Falcons were 14-2. Weren't the Vikings 15-1?
I think they were.
All right, maybe the Rich Eisen show had it wrong. Either way, Sam Darnold. I don't think he's going anywhere because McCarthy's coming off of the injury, and it's better that you have the devil that you do know than the devil that you don't.
You think they tag him, Anthony? You think they give him a contract?
I think they're going to tag him because they're going to learn from what the New York Giants did, because the Giants absolutely messed it up when they didn't tag Daniel Jones. I think they're going to tag Sam Darnold.
Anybody know what his tag value is?
It's got to be at least 40 because Jones would have been 32 2 years ago. Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see what they do.
Do you think he's even a semi possibility for the Giants if he were to hit the open market? Not that I want. Do you think they even entertain him?
I don't think he would entertain New York. So
I agree. I also he hangs out with Daniel Jones on a day-to-day basis. You don't think Daniel Jones has told him day in and day out how much Dable sucks?
Yeah.
And outside of that, I think part of the reason why Darnold is as good as he is because of KOC
100%.
And that system and what he's learned from there. I think he's getting tagged. They'll have him for one more year while JJ heals. We don't know if he's going to be ready for the regular season. I don't think he's going anywhere. And I agree with Anthony that I think Sam Darnold is going to have nightmares before he would even consider coming back to the New York area.
Yeah. I think they tag him too, by the way. I'm still in agreement with you. I'm less convinced than I was before because I was certain before. Now I'm like 80%, but I agree. If I had to guess, I think he gets tagged by Minnesota.
Yeah, there's no way he's coming back here. I mean, Daniel Jones don't need to tell him what the New York fan base is like. I mean, he knows. He's played in the stadium. He knows how shitty the stadium is, and he knows how bad the turf is. And I can't ever see. Well, then again, though, man, $1 Million Man said everybody's got a price, but I don't see the Giants forking over a ton of money for Sam Darnold. I do think they're going to draft the quarterback at some point in this draft, and they're going to get a guy like Justin Fields or Jameis Winston, somebody that's going to cost you $10 million a year, and they're going to spend that money, I would hope, in the offensive line. Outside of Trey Smith, I haven't really looked to see who the top free agents are. But the Giants got to continue to build this offensive line, and they got to draft some damn guys. Although Joe Shane's draft record of record drafting linemen hasn't been good, we got to figure this the hell out. I mean, it all starts up front, man. This game has changed over the years. It used to be a running league. It used to be smash mouth football. Now there's quarterbacks got to be mobile. They throw the ball 40 times a game. All kinds of receiving records.
I was thinking about that.
But at the end of the day, the trenches are what wins games.
I was thinking about that over the weekend, Bad Dog. I'm always, that's one of the things I'm most interested about of the NFL is how it constantly evolves year to year. And I was thinking about the teams during the playoffs this year. Obviously, a big narrative by a lot of people has been the mobile quarterback, which, 6 of these quarterbacks are very incredibly mobile. I would say 5. I wouldn't say Stroud's incredibly mobile, but he's capable of running. But the other thing, look at the running back, the great running back with the mobile quarterback. They all have that dynamic, these top teams. The Philadelphia Eagles with Hurts and Barkley, the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen and Cook. You have the Ravens, of course, with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. And there's another one that I'm not remembering off the top of my head. The Stroud and the running back with Houston is really good too. So that's one thing that I noticed watching those games. I'm like, they all got a superstar running back and that mobile quarterback. So
Washington, even although their running backs aren't superstars, they're effective. Good. Robinson's effective.
Yeah.
The Rams are kind of the outlier. They really, because Stafford's not a runner.
So, and the Lions, Jared Goff's not a runner.
But the Lions,
but they also have 2 damn good running backs. Yeah,
up front, the Lions are ridiculous. I mean, that's Do you think there's any way the Rams beat Philadelphia? I'm
going to tell you what. Maybe I'm going to look like a fool. I'm very tempted. I'm not going to do it. I don't have the balls to do it. But I am very tempted to say they're not going to just beat Philadelphia, but they're going to go to the Super Bowl. Like, I was very impressed with the Rams this past week. The Lions are banged up. That defense is banged up. I just have a feeling the Lions are going to get picked off in the playoffs, and I'm praying it's not the Philadelphia Eagles that do the picking. I'm very tempted to pick the Rams this week, and if I'm like, if I'm going to pick the Rams this week, I might as well just take it all the way and say they're going to go to this. There's always a surprise team. I think it's a possibility the way that the Rams looked this past week. I think they stand a very good chance to beat Philadelphia. If I had to pick, I'd probably pick the Eagles, but I think it's a near 50-50 game. I think the Rams have a real chance in that game.
I think they could, especially with McVay. Knowing McVay, like just him versus Sirianni, I just think McVay can outcoach him any day and twice on Sunday. No question.
Even though the Eagles ran for like 300 yards against the Rams the last time they played, it don't worry you at all.
I get it. The Eagles are the better team, but I don't know, man. I think the Rams have the better quarterback, and I think the Rams have the better coach.
I think Jalen Hurts is the worst quarterback left in the playoffs.
And Jalen Hurts sucks against pressure. And Darnold, I know he held on to the ball for too many times during that game, but he also got sacked a shitload. And I think as soon as Jalen starts getting pressure in his face, he's going to turn the ball over. No question.
Anthony, can the Rams win?
They absolutely can. I don't know if they will, especially because it's in Philly, and that's just a tough place for anybody to play. But
it's also a tough place to bring your girlfriend to a game. If you saw those tweets.
That too. Yeah, but you just can't rule out McVay and Stafford. They've been there. They've done it. They've won a Super Bowl. So I think it's definitely possible. I think Philly wins, but I definitely think it's going to be a close one.
All right. I hope so too.
The Ravens-Bills game.
Yeah.
How excited are you guys for that game?
I'm hoping the Bills pull off, man. I had the Bills going to the Super Bowl, so I'm going to pull
Bills Lions Super Bowl, but I'm so pissed that the Chiefs aren't playing one of those teams because I need the Chiefs to be knocked out this weekend, and I really don't think the Texans are going to be able to do it.
No, I don't either. The Bills got them though. I've been saying that all year. The Bills are going to do it.
We can only hope.
Listen, the Chiefs go back, just not Philly, just not them. Anybody but them.
I'm not watching the Super Bowl if it's between those two.
No, I can't do it. One last one. Chris, thank you, brother. He says, does the Jerome Henderson firing mean that Bowen won't be joining Vrabel in New England? Yeah, we kind of talked about this earlier. We think Bowen's going to stay here, and like Chris mentioned, Bowen's going to be able to hire his defensive back coach.
I think that's what it's about more than the narrative that I've seen on Twitter that the Giants are putting the blame on Henderson. I think it's more so the Giants saying, "Well, we're going all in with this coaching staff. Let's at least get the guys that they want." And obviously Bowen, and rightfully so, like Anthony and Adriana, and I think Bad Dog said that the secondary hasn't lived up to the expectation. So it's not like he's done a great job since he's been here. He's got a good reputation. I get that before he was here, but that's what I think it was. I think it's Bowen saying, well, I'd rather this guy. I'm more comfortable with this guy in my scheme. So that's what I think it is.
Yeah. Well, with that being the last question, our hour is up. We appreciate you guys and girls tuning in. Obviously, I have more to talk about next week. Things may progress, but right now, the Giants is a little downtime here, but obviously going to hear a lot more rumors as the weeks progress. We'll maybe get an idea of what the hell is going to happen in the draft. But obviously, once we get to March and free agency hits, there's going to be a lot to talk about because we got cap space, we got a lot of picks, and like I said, things will start to come into focus with this team.
Yeah, but what I always get excited about with free agency, Bad Dog, is not just for the Giants to see what they do. It really gives you an indicator of it shapes up the draft. When you start to see what all the teams from around the league start to do and who they bring in, you're like, that I don't even do a mock draft before that because it's pointless in my opinion. That's when you really start to get a good indicator of what every team around the league is going to look to do in the draft. And I saw Swervo said, I think the Rams and Commanders are pulling. I wouldn't be stunned, man. I would not be stunned if Washington beats the Lions because the Lions defense, they have injuries all over that defense. I wouldn't be stunned. I'm picking the Lions, but I wouldn't be stunned. And Jaden Daniels, I hate to say it. Holy shit. Did they hit on the quarterback?
Yeah, they did. I said that game 3 against Cincinnati.
That throw he made, right?
The throw to I think it was T. Higgins in the back.
40-yard touchdown.
I'm sorry, not T. Higgins. McLaurin. The 50-yard in McLaurin where he threw it to a spot in the back of the end zone with the blitzer right in his face. And
when he threw it, McLaurin was on like the 25.
Yeah, I just said, "Oh my God, Washington's got a quarterback." That was it was that game where I was like, "Oh my God, this guy's good."
Yeah,
and he's good. Maybe one day we'll have one of those guys. I don't know. One can only dream. But we appreciate you guys and girls tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. For Adriana, Anthony, the entertainer, it is Bad Dog, and we'll see you next week. Take care, Giants fans. We're out. Peace.